In this episode, the Toronto Bicycle Planner tells us why they are the top-rated bicycling city in North America. Then we drop in on the 30th anniversary party for Go Transit. We learn about Feet on the Street, a local advocacy group. The Bata Shoe Museum rounds out our visit to Toronto. Down the St. Lawrence in Montreal, we talk with a pediatrician about children struck by cars. And finally, we walk across the Confederation Bridge from Prince Edward Island with the Canadian Volkssport Federation. Stay tuned. We're talking with Daniel Egan, who's the bicycle planner for the City of Toronto. The City of Toronto was named the #1 bicycling city in North America by Bicycling Magazine a couple years ago. What are you doing that got you that distinction?
Well, I think what sets us apart from a lot of places that we're doing many things for bicycling. We have identified 3 important infrastructures for cycling. That's the physical infrastructure, the social infrastructure, and the economic infrastructure. I think many times people look just at the physical infrastructure, and the other infrastructures are very important. In order to encourage cycling, we need to do more than provide just facilities. We need to make it acceptable to cycle. And if you look around on the streets here, we have a pretty high cycling ridership in the city. It's increased dramatically in the last decade.
And what are some of the things you do? I mean, physical, everyone knows what that is, but briefly summarize what the highlights are.
The highlights, we've got a pretty aggressive program to put in bicycle lanes, a whole network of bicycle lanes throughout the city. And that's something that's a more recent program in the last 4 or 5 years. We have for a long time been putting in bicycle paths where we have open space to do that along river valleys and along the waterfront. And we're trying to connect those up with the adjacent cities as well. Other physical things, we put in about 500 bicycle racks every year, and these are at locations requested by cyclists. Those are put in free of charge on city sidewalks. You may have seen them, the post with a ring attached. So that's something we do every year. We require new buildings to provide bike parking and showers facilities for cycling commuters, and apartment buildings to provide lock-up for bicycle owners in the building. So that's an idea of the kinds of things. We'll do a lot of other small things as well, but those are the major programs. When we talk about social infrastructure, we're talking about everything from Bike Week to providing educational programs, awareness programs, anything that kind of raises the awareness of cycling as a legitimate form of transportation, something that contributes to the quality of life in the city. I mean, one thing that I think that sets Toronto apart from many North American cities, we have a very vibrant downtown. A lot of people work down here, a lot of people live downtown. Distances are fairly short for people who live in the city. In the central area, there's about 140,000 people who live here, and about 8% of them get to work on bike as a primary means, 12% walk, and about 65% take transit. So you can see it's a pretty high non-automobile modal split. And that's very important. It's partly the structure of the city. So all the things that make the city a dense, vibrant place are very good for walking, cycling, and transit.
And the third factor you mentioned?
The economic infrastructure. We're trying to raise awareness that cycling is part of the economic life of the city as well. There's a lot of businesses sprouting up to cater to the interests of new cycling commuters and what have you. We've done a number of things. We have a bicycle-friendly business award where you can nominate a business who's done something special for cyclists, whether put in parking, whether allow you to take your bike inside the shop, maybe allowing their employees secure parking and showers. So we try to recognize people who've gone out of their way to promote cycling in any way they can. We also have a very active program called the bicycle user groups. We say we're planting bugs in large corporations, and they're generally people inside the corporation that are active cyclists that want to promote cycling from within their own organization. And it's not just in the workplace. Sometimes it's in a community group or whatever. And the idea is that we have we have a few staff at the city, but there's only so much we can do. So we try to give information and materials to people out there who want to promote cycling in their own way, and that's kind of furthers our work here.
And what are you looking for in the future?
I think we're at a bit of a crossroads. I mean, we need to really accelerate the bicycle lane program. For example, we're putting in between 3 and 5 kilometers every year. We need to triple that. We've identified a target in the next 5 years to have a system where you'd never be more than 1 kilometer from a bicycle lane in the downtown area, and never more than 2 kilometers in the rest of the city. And I think that's really important. The bicycle lanes have been very successful. They're still not without problems. We still have problems with people trying to park in them, but it's getting better and better. And I think that they're just a very visual reminder to everyone that we want people to cycle. We know from the surveys we've done that a bicycle lane encourages people to make more trips by bike. It encourages people to use that street over other streets, so it's very successful. Another thing we like to see, and this kind of goes beyond the City of Toronto boundary, but better integration with transit. We have bike racks at transit stations now, but from some of the research we've done, I think in the outlying suburban areas, there's tremendous potential to reduce automobile trips by making safe routes to the transit stations and secure parking at the transit stations, and that needs to be heavily promoted. So that's another area of future growth.
We're talking with Leslie Wood, the Toronto Bike Week co-coordinator. What is Bike Week?
Well, Bike Week is probably the biggest celebration of urban cycling that happens during the year in Toronto. It happens in cities across Ontario and in fact across the continent. It's a chance to, raise awareness, to get the message out that bicycling is a relevant and useful form of transportation, and it's a chance to support the people who try to cycle to work, who try to cycle to the shops by giving them festivals, parties, information sessions, workshops, whatever they need.
And what sort of participation do you get in this?
Well, we've got 34 events over the next 9 days that involve over 75 organizations and corporations. By the end of June 1st, which is I think 9 days from now, we're going to have about 20,000 people actively participating in Bike Week, and that is just a fragment of the people who'll be made more aware of the issues and concerns around cycling.
So what sort of events are going on then?
Well, the biggest event happens on Monday morning, and that's a carryover from Bike to Work Week, which it was called for the last 7 years, where we have a mass convergence ride, and cyclists start in all the corners of the city, converge at one of the downtown intersections, and ride down Yonge Street, and it's a big kind of colorful parade. It's not a parade, it's part of traffic, and then we come here and have a big pancake breakfast. We have Bikes Mean Business Gala, where we give the awards to the bicycle-friendly businesses. That happens on the Thursday night. We've got a charity race between bicycle police and the couriers happening on Saturday. We've got free breakfasts every day for cyclists, workshops on how to do good trips and touring and that sort of thing, and just general sort of celebration.
What sort of feedback have you gotten from past events? Does this get more people to cycle day to day?
Yeah, there's an amazing number of people who said that they started to cycle to work during Bike to Work Week, including my parents. My mother started riding last year during Bike to Work Week, and there are people in our office who started riding, 6 years ago during Bike to Work Week. It's just a time to do it when it's safe and there's support there, and we want to make everybody feel good about riding their bike in the downtown core.
We're talking with Eldred King, who's co-chair of Go Transit. You had a little party going on this morning. What are you celebrating?
Well, celebrating 30 years of the operation of the Go Transit system in the Greater Toronto Area, which includes 5 regions and Metropolitan Toronto.
And what is Go Transit?
Go Transit is a commuter rail and a commuter bus serving the outlying 5 regions, bringing passengers into the core of Toronto.
How does that fit in with the other transit services for Toronto?
The other transit services connect in the outlying regions. The municipalities, their transit systems connect with the Go Transit stations in the outlying areas, and they carry it's not a large percentage of passengers. We have large parking lots where people drive. We also have drop-off and so on.
What sort of changes do you anticipate in the future?
Well, I believe that Go Transit is the spine, is the main core of a transit system that can serve the Greater Toronto Area. There does need to be some better coordination as it relates to transit out in the regions, and I'm sure that will be forthcoming. But Go Transit will be the spine. Some of our trains at the present time only carry passengers one way, that is in the morning and then out at night. and hopefully there will soon be a two-way system, because many of the employment sector do travel both ways. Our highways are basically busy in both directions, and our trains can be busy in both directions as well.
What's the biggest changes you've had since your first run 30 years ago?
The ticket taking, it is much more sophisticated now. The safety measures that we have initiated, we accommodate the disabled. There have been many changes. You know, the infrastructure itself is certainly much more modern than it was in the beginning. But you know, as far as passengers, the passenger crowd continues to grow.
We're in Toronto talking with Joan Dwaron with Feet on the Street. What is Feet on the Street?
Feet on the Street is an organization of pedestrians that was started back in the late 1994 when we decided that we had to make conditions for pedestrians much safer. There's quite a lot of terrible fatalities, particularly with regard to seniors in the suburban areas of Toronto. And we felt this is urgent. We've got to get something started. It's got to be a strong citizens movement that presses local councillors and the public at large to understand that a great deal more concern for pedestrians must be considered in designing roads and in facilitating particularly speeding cars. So that's become one of our major issues, the speed of automobiles. And to do this, we've been pushing to get pedestrian committees in the different cities around Metro Toronto. We've had success at Metro after at least a couple of years of pressure. It took a long time. So if you're working on this, I would suggest that you get in for the long haul.
We're talking with Jonathan Walford. He is curator of the Bata Shoe Museum. How long has the museum been here?
We're just in our second year right now, so we're still a fairly new museum on the museum field.
You've got quite a collection here. It must go back a little farther than that.
Well, we started collecting actually in the late 1970s, and it started off as a private collection and it became a public collection. Originally, about 5 years ago, we opened up a temporary site before this permanent site was built.
How have shoes changed over the centuries?
Well, for a lot. I have some examples. What we want to talk about mostly, when you get to the 18th century, you're dealing with a shoe the way we think of shoes nowadays. So we have a heel, which is standard on both men's and women's shoes, but a higher heel on women's shoes than you have on men's shoes. Women's shoes in the early 18th century, if you lived in the continent, had very tall, thin heels. If you lived in England, they were definitely a shorter, thicker, squatter heel. And both of those heels represent the type of lifestyles that these women were accustomed to. In the continent, you lived in the city for most of the season, and you went to the country for a vacation. In England, you lived in the country for most of the season, and you went to the city for a short time. So their environment is more gravel roads and muddy back lanes, so they need a good, sensible shoe with a good, sturdy heel. The continental European woman, it's terrazzo floors and marbles and coaches, so you can go with a really high, thin heel. That all changes when you get to the French Revolution, and suddenly now you have no heel at all. Plus also democratic materials. It's very fashionable to be middle class. So your shoes are now made of leather, cotton, linen, very simple materials, and no fanciness, no fancy silks, no big enormous buckles on them, no tall heels. And so this is a really good, sensible shoe. It's going to get you around. It gets the masses from point A to point B. Once you get into the beginnings of the 19th century, This is actually an American shoe. We collected it in Massachusetts. And very popularly in the States at the time was this sort of cafe au lait color, this sort of coffee with milk color leather. And you find these more commonly in the States than you do in Europe. Because in States and in Canada, we don't have the same road system available to us as you do, say, in London and Paris and Rome and Berlin. We've got, maybe there's a taxi, so chances are you're going to have to walk wherever you're going. So you have to wear a boot that will basically keep the mud off of your stockings, and also will be made sturdily enough that it will actually last a lot of wearings. Once you get to the end of the 19th century, two examples here. These are both from the same period. These are both from the 1880s. And this silk pair, or silk example, is great for evening, but it doesn't work if you're actually going for a walk in the daytime. So what you end up with is you end up with two styles available at the same time. This is something that begins after about 1860. You get fancy stuff for balls and parties and sensible stuff for like walking to the store or visiting friends. And that's something that really continues right up, more so right up to this day.
You can see it in the subway, people going to work.
Exactly, you sure can. The next big changes you have are, as the hemlines go up in the 1910s and 20s, the boot becomes the most popular way of covering your foot. Part of this is to keep your ankle warm, part of it is to keep people from looking at your ankles. So it's a bit of a modesty thing as well. It's not the most sensible covering with that high, thin heel. What you do have as an alternative is the Cuban heel, or military heel, which is this much thicker heel, just like the English shoes at the turn of the century, or at the beginning of the 18th century. This is great for walking. It's going to get you from point A to point B a lot easier than a high, thin heel will. So that leads us really right up till today, and the only difference you find with today is that, well, this might be something, here's is actually about 10 years old now, this is from the late 80s. This high, thin heel is great for a cocktail party. What you actually remember seeing women wearing to work every day was a running shoe. So that gets them on the subway or the streetcar or whatever, and then when they get to work or their party, wherever they're going, they slip those off and they put those on. So it's actually a sensible way. There's nothing wrong with wearing those for an hour or two. There is something wrong with wearing them for 8 hours. You shouldn't wear those to work. But if you want to look good, that's great. But for sense sake, that's what you actually need for a good, long, hard walk.
People come to your museum, they'll see examples of all these different eras of shoes?
Yeah, at all times we have some part of the collection on display, so there's always some element available. We have 4 galleries, so some point of it, you always find everything here.
We're talking with Barry Pless, who's a pediatrician at Montreal Children's Hospital and also editor of Injury Prevention, which is a journal. You've done some research on children being injured by automobiles. What sort of things have you discovered?
Well, both what I've discovered and what others in the field who contribute to our journal and other scientific literature, there are a couple of very clear patterns which are important to recognize. The first is that although society as a whole tends to blame children when they're hit by cars, our research and other research suggests that children cannot be held responsible for their behavior, especially children under the age of 9 or 10. There are many reasons why their behavior is likely to be unpredictable, and the only way to prevent these horrible injuries is for the driver to be constantly aware that a child is likely to do something unpredictable. That means obviously driving within the posted speed limits within cities, obeying stop signs, not speeding through school zones, respecting the pedestrians' right of way on crossings, and that sort of thing. So that's one of the most important findings, I think, that most of the research in this field is now pointing towards.
What stages does a child go through as they develop their ability to maneuver safely in traffic?
Well, the stages are complicated, and because moving through traffic is a very complicated process, and it would take too long for me to describe all the stages and all the tasks. The long and the short of it is that until a child reaches around the age of 9 or 10, they simply don't possess all of the necessary skills to put all the pieces together in order to be able to cross safely. Now, of course, some children have to cross streets. They can't be accompanied, and that's why the onus on the motorist is all the greater. Ideally, we'd like children to be supervised while crossing by a parent or another adult until that age, but that's not always possible, and so the responsibility of the motorist becomes dominant there again.
Would it be enough to enforce our current traffic laws, or do we need to do more beyond that?
Well, it depends on what the current traffic laws are. In Britain recently, there was a major experiment where municipalities were given the opportunity to reduce speeds to 20 miles an hour, and those that chose to do so had absolutely sensational results in terms of the number of the reduction in rates of injuries to children, both pedestrians and bicyclists. So that if we're talking about current traffic laws which allow speeds of 30 miles an hour in urban areas where children are frequently seen, that's probably not enough. And I know driving at 20 is tough, but that's probably what we need to save lives.
And what other sorts of patterns have you noticed in injuries to children?
Well, the other one that sort of ties in with the first in terms of traffic and how it flows and how people obey laws and so forth is a striking pattern that's been seen world over, and that is the very large, in some studies as high as 4 or 5 times greater rates of injury deaths, pedestrian injury deaths, to children who live in poor neighborhoods compared with those who live in the richest neighborhoods. And we have to ask ourselves why this should be. It's true that it's seen for other injuries, but for pedestrian and bicyclist injuries in particular, I think, and it's hard to prove this, but I do believe that it is the way traffic flows in poor neighborhoods. It's not simply that the streets are more crowded, which they are, that there are fewer parks, etc., but it is also the way traffic flows in those neighborhoods. That is to say, it goes faster, and people know that they're less likely to be apprehended by the police because poor people don't have the resources to pressure the police to enforce the laws as they stand. That's my theory, and I truly believe that there are some data to support it. Whatever the interpretation, the fact is that children in poor neighborhoods have much higher pedestrian injury rates and pedestrian fatality rates.
How well have training programs for children in schools to learn how to cross the street and ride the bicycle in traffic, how well have those worked?
Well, the evidence is not very encouraging, and that's not surprising in light of what I said before. This is a very, very complex task, and it's not just that the evidence suggests that these programs have probably not been successful, although there are some that look promising. It's possible that these programs, like bicycle training programs, which in the end allow children or allow parents and teachers to think that children are properly prepared for this complicated task, and therefore they allow the children to engage in the task of crossing a road where there's busy traffic at an earlier age than they should, actually result in having a negative effect. That is, that there are more kids who end up being injured and killed by cars because the training program has provided false confidence that the child can really cope when they're still not developmentally ready to do so. So we need to be very, very cautious about not assuming that the answer to this problem is a better training program. Certainly if one thinks they have one that can overcome the inherent problems of developmental immaturity, then they need to be carefully evaluated. But until we feel absolutely confident that we know how to train kids, and all kids, not just the average child, but the child who is genetically hyperactive and impulsive and inattentive, or the child with ADD, attention deficit disorders. I mean, the motorists can't say, well, that child's been well trained and that child doesn't have ADD, etc. The motorist has to assume that any child who's going to come along is likely to do something unpredictable, and as I said before, the only way to prevent a disaster or tragedy from happening under those circumstances is for the motorist to be driving in such a way that he expects the worst from the kid.
So we should spend as much effort training the motorist as we do training the children.
No, we should spend about 10 times as much effort training the motorist and insisting that motorists get punished severely when they commit infractions, whether or not a child is injured. I mean, we don't want to wait until children are killed or injured before the police decide that it's time to crack down on a particularly dangerous intersection or on motorists who are passing school buses that are letting kids off and that sort of thing. And that's typically the pattern throughout Canada and the United States, is that we wait until something terrible has happened and then we decide to crack down. So that the preventive opportunity disappears. I mean, it's preventing for the next time, but it's not really taking steps that are likely to be useful in the long run.
We're on Prince Edward Island talking with Lionel Conrad of the Canadian Volkssport Federation. What is the Canadian Volkssport Federation?
Well, it's a federation of over 65 walking clubs from across Canada, and we put on walking events and other non-competitive sports all year round. And there are, besides Canada, there are clubs all over the world, like lots in the United States and another 26 countries.
And you have sort of a special Volksmarch going on today. What's different about today's?
Well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime walk. This bridge is going to open to traffic tomorrow night, and there's no provision to walk across the bridge. The pedestrians will be shuttled across, as will the cyclists. So this is really once in a lifetime to walk across this magnificent bridge, which is the longest in North America, a multi-span bridge, the longest one in North America.
If someone wanted to find out more about Volksmarching and possibly locate a club in their area, how can they do that?
Well, one very good way, if you have access to the internet, is just do a search on the word Volkssports. That's VOLKS SPORT. All the clubs in Canada are listed on the internet, and also all the American clubs who both have home pages, and also a lot of the individual clubs have home pages.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.